Hey, welcome to another tutorial on LScript. Last time we learned about while loops. Today we're learning about if statement. And as a matter of fact, we're creating a full plugin for a camera shake. Alright, so let's begin. Let's go to our utilities, open LScript commander, which I already have done here. Let's go to items and create a null object. So what we need to know is how to create a key and how to move an object to another location. So let me go to frame 10 and move my null, and I see here it says add position in LScript commander, so that's the command. However, if I go to the X and just type a number there, it's going to say position. So the one I want is position, not add position, because I don't want to be adding to the current position. I want to create a new position. Alright, so that's about it, and I need to know how to create a key. So let me press enter, and the command, surprise surprise, is create key. Let me delete, and surprise, delete key. So these are the commands that we need. 3 commands and we're home and dry. So let me cut these. Let me leave that trusty null object. So let me go to my text editor. I'm going to use Sublime Text. You can use any text editor of your choice. So let's type warnings, and let me control scroll to enlarge the text just in case you can see it. So let's create our generic function, which is required for any script, for a generic script to run. So at this point, I've done so much work, so I need to save it. So let me save, just in case I lose this awesome work so far. So let me paste my commands, just so I don't lose them. And now to begin, as we all know, oh wait a second, create key created the key at 0.6. However, I was at frame 10 when creating. So what's going on here? Well, Lightwave uses seconds to know which keyframe you're at, not the keyframes, but the number of seconds. Now, the way it gets to this is by using the frames per second of your scene. So my scene is at 15 frames per second. So what it did, let me use my calculator. I was at frame 10. I divide that by the frames per second, and I get 0.6, which is cool. That's how it got to that. So how do you know the frames per second? Because we're going to need that, the frames per second of the current scene. Well, luckily for us, there's a function called scene, open, close bracket. Now that scene contains information about our scene. So, but this is too complex to type with all those open and close brackets, so I'm going to assign it to scene. I'm going to say scene is equal to that. So when I call this, I'm talking about that. Okay, moving on. So I can ask like, hey, scene, what's your frame per second at this point? So to do that, I'll say scene.fps. That's how we ask. That's the frames per second. However, we need more than that. We need to know the start point and the end point of our timeline. So we're going to ask the scene again and say, hey, what's going on? Where is your start point and your end point? So to do that, we say preview start. That's how you ask the preview beginning and preview end. Those are the 2 points that we want. So how exactly do I know these things? Well, good question. Well, if you go to your installation folder for Lightwave, there's a user's manual, which you can find there. Just search for it and say user's guide, LScript user's guide. It's in the scripts folder, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and it will give you information on such things. All right, so let's assign these to some actual values. So I'm going to say start point is equal to, and then I'm going to say end point is equal to. Now, I don't like the way the text is looking here. If you're using Sublime Text, go down to your bottom right where it says plain text and change this to JavaScript. LScript is not recognized as a language, so we're going to trick the thing into thinking it's JavaScript, so it gives us these nice colors. Just so I can see, it just looks nicer. All right, so let's create a requester for our user. So let's say requester begin, we're going to call it camera shake, okay? And then requester post, like that, okay? Now this is where we begin to use an actual if statement. Now requester post returns a value because the script stops right here. It pauses. Once it shows you the interface, it will pause and wait for your input. Are you going to press OK or cancel? So now we can request and say the user answer. We can name it anything in this case because this is a variable. I'm just naming it user answer. You can name it A if you want. That's fine. Now the user answer is equal to. So when the user presses something, this function returns a value of true or false. True if the user presses OK, false if they press cancel. So we'll use an if statement. Now an if statement is just like a while loop, only that if this part is true, this inside, whatever code is inside here will run. If it's false, this will be skipped entirely. So we're going to ask a question. Is user answer equal to false? Right? Because that's what we're interested in, right? Falsehoods. Well, if you notice here, I have two double equal signs. If you use a single one, you're assigning, you're saying this should move into there, right? But if I put two double equal signs, I'm actually asking, is this equal to that? So if it's false, then the user has pressed cancel. So let's return and exit the function altogether. Now, if they haven't pressed cancel, then we get to the good part. So we're going to say good part, like that. So this is a comment because of the double quotes there, of course. So here we create a while loop. Now the reason we create a loop is because there are so many keyframes here and we don't know how many they are to begin with. So we'll let the computer figure out all that for us. So let's use a while loop. While whatever is in here is true, we're going to loop. Now in that loop, what we want to do is create a key. So let me copy that and paste it there. Now, how do we know where to put the key? Well, we know that start point is the beginning. So in my case, start point is at 0. So what I want to do is check, is start point less than end point, right? For as long as it's less than that, loop. But we don't want to loop forever because these values can remain static. So we have to increment the start point. So we say start point is equal to start point plus 1. So after we create a key at 0, we increment start point and check again, is it still less than end point? If it's true, continue looping, right? But first, before we actually create a key, we have to move our no object. And by the way, whatever operations we are doing here are being done on the currently selected object, whether it's a no object or whatever object is selected in the scene. So position, there's X, there's a Y value, and there's Z. So for now, I think we are just going to use zeros, 0, 0, 0, because we just want to prove that it's actually working. Now we want to create a key on every keyframe. Now, in this case, this start point is going to be representing our key numbers because it's increasing by 1 every time. So let's that's the start point. But remember, Lightwave doesn't use keyframe numbers, it uses seconds. So to get our seconds, we have to divide the frame number by the scene frames per second. So we're going to ask again, hey, what's your scene frames per second? So we're going to ask that using scene.fps as discussed earlier. So let's recap a little bit. We don't need these guys, so let me actually I can delete this one. We need delete key for later, but let me scroll back down a little bit so we see more. So first of all, we get a scene object. This we actually don't need. So we ask, what is your start point, Mr. Scene? and what is your endpoint, right? So we'll get the answers and shove them in there. Then we begin our requester. We tell the computer, hey, we want to create a requester with this title. So user answer, requester post. So the requester is posted here, and we check the user answer. If it's false, we exit. If it's true, we go to the good part. In the good part, we loop for as long as this value is less than this value. So originally this is usually less, so it's going to go through here and then add to it until etc, etc. So let's see if this actually works. Let's go to utilities, add plugin. Let's add our plugin, go to additional, check for the plugin. In my case, it's first plugin, so it must be down here. And if we press cancel, nothing happens. If we press OK, what do you know? We have a keyframe on every frame. But the last keyframe doesn't have a key, so if you want to add that as well, just put an equal sign here. Now we need to check if start point is less than or equal to endpoint. Right? So far, so good. But we want the no object to be shaking. So let's create some random numbers. Luckily for us, there's a function called random. Random takes two numbers. The minimum like 1, 10. So if I put it like this, I'm asking, I want a random number between 1 and 10. But you know, this scene is in meters, so that's too much. 10 meters is way too much for a camera shake. We actually need very, very low values. So if I write something like 0.0, 1.0, it's going to know that I need decimal numbers. So I'm going to say number is equal to, so you can name it anything. I'm just naming it number because I don't know why. So let me copy these in here. Instead of zeros, we'll put number there. So let's try this again, Let's see if we get some random numbers. So as you can see, we have some keyframes now, which is good, but they're all in the positive directions and they're too high. So let's reduce these numbers. So I'm going to say the maximum will be 0.05, very, very small. And the minimum will be minus, so that we get some negative values as well, minus 0.05. Something like this. Okay, so let me go back here, run it again, and that's much better. So if I run this now, it's shaking, but it's shaking left, right. It's not really that chaotic because I want it to be very chaotic. So in order to do that, let me create these three values, number X, number Y, and number Z, because I want a random. So far we've been using the same number for X, Y, and Z. I want a random number for each one of these. So X, Y, Z. So it will create a random number, assign it there, another random number, assign it there, and so on. So let's test and see what that looks like. And okay, yeah, that's pretty good. That's real chaos right there. So let's see what we've done through the lens of a camera. And let's load a victim in here. Let me find a victim, a good victim to... There we go. Our victim has been loaded. So let me go to the camera view, zoom out like that, and then zoom into our subject like that. Now, if I happen to parent the camera, let me go to frame 0 and parent it to the null, then we get this shaking. Look at that. Nice camera shake. Awesomeness. All right, now the interface is blank, so what we might want is for the user to select these values on their own. So to do that, let me go to between requester begin and requester post, we have to put some controls. So I'll use CTL number. That's how we get a number. So I'll say mean value. I'll ask the user, put in a mean value in here. What is the default? The default is minus 0.05. That's what I want as a default. So Control Shift D to duplicate this. and then type max value and then positive. So I need a way to access this, so I'll give them names. I'll say this one is min and this one is max, right? So instead of having hard-coded numbers here, we can use min and max. So whatever the user selects, that's what we'll use as the basis for a random number. So let me press Ctrl D to replace all of them at once. Copy this max, go here, D, Ctrl D, paste. Right. So we'll get the values from the user. Now, another thing we might want to do is, if you look at the no object, it's got a value on every keyframe. We might want to skip a few keyframes sometimes. So there's a way to do that using what is known as the modulus operator. It's like division. There's multiplication, addition, subtraction, division, and modulus. So let's use the modulo function. Let's ask, while we are looping here, if start point modulus, use the percent, modulus 3, something like so, is equal to 0. Okay. Now we want to run all this, but the adding part should always be there. It should be added. Otherwise you have an infinite loop. So always leave this adding part outside any if statements if you don't want to crash your PC, that is. So let's put everything here inside the if statement. So we are asking, now what does modulus do? Modulus is an operator which divides in two numbers and gives you the remainder as the answer. So what I'm asking here is that is start point divided by 3, is the remainder equal to 0? Okay. So start modulus 3, if that's equal to 0. So let's use a calculator to just visualize this a little bit. What I'm asking is, let's say my frame number is 0. So 0 divided by 3 is 0. So it will put a keyframe there because the answer is 0. Right? Now, is 1 divided by 3? Now, you see, the answer is a decimal number, which means there's a remainder. So if there's a remainder, then skip that one. So let's go to frame 2, divide by 3. There's a remainder. Skip that one. Let's go to frame 3, divide by 3. No remainder. Don't skip that one. Run. So it will run every third keyframe. Okay? That's how you do it. So if I increase the number to 4 here, then it will be dividing by 4 and it will run every 4 keyframes. Now the good thing here is we can ask the user to enter this number as well. So let's call this one skip. Skip frames. The default can be 3. Now, one thing I forgot also, min and max are actually controls. They're not values. So we have to put dot value at the end here. I always forget this. So by pressing Ctrl and selecting, you can select multiple places and then just say dot value. Min, max, dot value. So the modulus shouldn't be hard-coded as well. We're going to use the skip dot value. So we'll get whatever number the user has added in this skip how many frames. Now, another problem is that here we have keyframes that on every frame. If we want to change this to every third keyframe, we'll need to delete some keys first. So let's use the same while loop. Ctrl Shift D. So here we'll create keys. Here we'll delete keys. So let's change this. Let's remove the modulus part. Okay. And then use delete key instead. So create key. Let me copy this. Delete this one. Put delete key. Delete. Okay. So we'll run this same thing and delete the keys. Then we'll run it again and add keys. Now, at this point, start point, after this loop, start point will become equal to end point. So we have to ask it again, what is your start point? at this point. So let's go down here, copy this and paste it here. So let's recap a little bit. Let me zoom out. So first of all, we get the scene object, get the start point and end point of the timeline, open a requester with 3 controls, the minimum and maximum value and how much to skip. So these will be input by the user, or they can use the default values. If they press, then we load the requester. If they press cancel, we return. If not, we go to the good part. We loop through the timeline, delete all the keyframes there, then come back and ask what is your start point again, because we've ruined it by adding to it over time. So once we get the start point again, we'll loop again and then we create keys. Now we only create keys when the modulus is 0 at these points. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense and we can now see the final plugin. So there we are. So those are the values. I want to be putting a keyframe skip on modulus 3. So let me say okay. And there you go. You see, it's skipping certain frames and the camera shake is not as much. Look at that. It looks more handheld. So play around with these values and see what you come up with. But otherwise, you have a working plugin and congratulations. All right. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And subscribe or support me on Patreon. The link is in the description. I will see you in another tutorial.